Moving into our hazardous weather graphic, we'll start up here in the north and northeast. Wind chill advisory out for tonight into Wednesday here for the eastern Arctic coast and the eastern North Slope, northeastern Brooks Range areas there for wind chills 45 to 55 degrees below zero. And in the central interior here, this is a winter weather advisory, or you could call it a blowing snow advisory for the higher elevation areas for winds gusting to 40 miles an hour, reducing visibilities to half mile or less at times in blowing snow. And again, that's the Tanana area up into the Koyukuk Valley, Bettles, eastward across the Yukon Flats to Fort Yukon. So that all north of the greater Fairbanks area. And then out here to the west, got a winter weather advisory out until midnight tonight for St. Lawrence Island, Bering Strait coast, and the Yukon Delta for strong winds and blowing snow, again reducing visibilities to a half mile or less at times, so that ends around midnight tonight. And down for the Alaska Peninsula here, Eastern Aleutians, winter weather advisory out for tonight through tomorrow for the Eastern Aleutians, Cold Bay area for snow, anywhere from several inches of snow with gusty northwest winds again, and they're also reducing visibilities to a half mile or less at times there. And then here for the eastern North Gulf Coast and northern Panhandle, that's a winter storm watch for possible heavy snow developing late tonight and through the day Wednesday into Wednesday night and possibly even into Thursday over the northern areas there. And for satellite imagery, can see a weak low here tracking east-northeast near the Queen Charlotte Islands, and that pushing a band of rain into the southern Panhandle today. Otherwise, pretty dry for the remainder of the southeast coastal areas there, but moisture also traveling northwestward here from the eastern Gulf of Alaska up to the North Gulf Coast. That's increasing the snow this afternoon, places like Cordova, Middleton Island, on up into Valdez, and starting to creep into the Prince William Sound area. And also up here over the eastern interior, starting to pick up some areas of light snow shower activity there. Otherwise, cold and dry over the remainder of the state with some scattered clouds out through this area and cold north winds from actually the Arctic here coming all the way down across much of the Bering Sea and to the Aleutians and beyond here, with the coldest area here over the eastern Aleutians back up toward the Pribilof, temperatures in the upper teens there with some areas of light snow around St. Paul, and then snow here with temperatures in the upper 20s for the eastern Aleutians to the Alaska Peninsula area. Rolling that through again, you can see this area cloudiness breaking up as it drops southward, and really not much associated with that. And then the white up here is the cold temperatures well below zero for the North Slope on out to the Arctic coast. Otherwise, not much in the way of any storminess. And the other batch of clouds way up there over the Russian Far East, that's a lot of mid and high level cirrus coming over the top of a big area of upper level high pressure over the eastern Sea of Okhotsk and Kamchatka Peninsula. On the chart today, you can see at the surface those areas of high pressure with the cold temperatures over the North Slope into the Russian Far East, back down to the far western Bering Sea there. And that northerly flow out there has pushed the snow showers south of Adak westward to Shimianatu, and then some snow from Atka Island increases here along with the winds over the eastern Aleutians and Alaska Peninsula, and St. Paul right on the northern edge of that area of light snow, which will be continuing to push southward with some drier air coming in. Otherwise, snow showers, southwest Kodiak Island possible, and then this area of light snow increasing here along the North Gulf Coast into Prince William Sound, and starting to pick up some light flurries or snow shower activity here over the Talkeetnas, but really pretty hit and miss there, nothing significant yet. And then the forecast for tonight, this warm front will spread snow, possibly heavy snow, up into the northern panhandle and into the Yakutat area, with periods of light snow continuing for Cordova into Valdez, then actually expanding over Prince William Sound and the Kenai Peninsula area. Probably see some light snow for Seward, maybe even toward Homer and Seldovia. Chance of snow showers on the increase for the eastern slopes of the western Alaska Range, mostly south of Rainy Pass. And otherwise, clouds on the increase, winds on the increase. You can see a tighter gradient here over the interior due to that high over the over the north slope and the lower pressure here just east of Kodiak. So again, gusty winds, maybe up to 40 miles an hour, higher elevations of the central interior areas. And pretty gusty winds continue here along the southwest coast, beginning to get lighter St. Lawrence Island up to the northwest areas under the ridge axis. But not much change from today for the southern Bering Sea, except that area of moisture will drop south of the Pribilofs and conditions will become a little bit better, especially flying conditions there, and but not so for the Alaska Peninsula. And then for tomorrow, still snow, blowing snow, continuing, maybe another inch or so, mainly on the Bering Sea side of the eastern Aleutians, Alaska Peninsula, just snow showers, Adak and Atka, with winds really coming down there. And for the Pribilofs, could get into some sunshine, possibly, maybe in the afternoon. Mostly clear and dry over the interior, and still breezy over the central and eastern part of the state in at the higher elevations, but pretty light winds for the northern interior valleys up to the Arctic coast. This area here coming down from the northwest, probably just clipping the western central Arctic coast with some skiffs of light snow and flurry conditions, a little bit lower in the way of flying with maybe some IFR associated with that. And the panhandle, pretty wet conditions, snow in the north, rain and snow in the south, mostly rain for Prince of Wales Island, and snow again continuing on the increase, pushing into the southern Copper River Basin. Heaviest though for the North Gulf Coast, western Seward Peninsula, periods of snow for the Resurrection Bay area Seward, and then kind of cutting off here for the eastern Kenai Peninsula, not much at all, maybe a few isolated snow showers for the western Alaska Range, mostly south of Rainy again. Chance of snow, Kodiak Island, and then for the day on Thursday, again, most of the snow staying over here to the east. Dry conditions, light winds now over the interior. Temperatures staying on the cold side. High pressure centered over the Bering Strait. And again, another weak disturbance approaching the western Arctic coast, maybe increasing the flurry chances there during the afternoon hours. But dry conditions, lighter winds, still some snow showers for the Alaska Peninsula, but the winds will be much lighter there and not much going on out over the Bering Sea and the Aleutians. So lows tonight, about 10 below for the Copper River Basin and areas west of the Alaska Range here, 0 to 5 below for Bristol Bay, lower 20s Kodiak, and 0 to 15 south central Alaska. In the 20s to lower 30s for the Panhandle. Highs tomorrow, 30s for the southeast coast, teens for the Copper River Basin, and 5 degrees for the Kuskokwim Valley, 20s to lower 30s south central Alaska, mostly in the 20s, and around freezing for Kodiak, followed by lows, a little colder here, Kuskokwim Valley down to 15 or 10 to 15 below there, below 0 again for the Bristol Bay area, lower 20s Kodiak, 0 to 15 south central Alaska, and 20s to mid 30s for the Panhandle. Highs on Thursday. Into the mid-40s southern southeast coast, cooler to the north, around 20 for the Copper River Basin, 20 upper 20s to lower 30s, south central Alaska to Kodiak Island. Up in the interior, lows below 0 everywhere tonight, coldest on the north slope, 30 to 40 below there, followed by highs, 0 to 5 central interior out to the Bering Strait, but below 0 all the way up to the Arctic coast, followed by lows even colder on Thursday morning, 25 to 40 below over the interior, and 10 to 15 below Seward Peninsula, St. Lawrence Island, followed by highs a little above 0 there for Fairbanks to Eagle, Northway, and below 0 up to the north. And on the southwest coast, lows tonight around 0, 12 for the Pribilofs, and teens for the Alaska Peninsula, lower to mid-20s eastern Aleutians, and lower 30s out toward Shemya. Highs 30 to 35 central western Aleutians, upper 20s for Unalaska, lower 20s for the Alaska Peninsula.
And now, aviation weather around Alaska.
Well, with the next front coming up, we've got IFR covering all the southeast coast by tomorrow morning and all along the North Gulf Coast here into the across the Barren Islands and actually the southern Kenai Peninsula up into southern Prince William Sound, all the way in to southern Kamishak Bay. Good VFR up in the interior, maybe some increasing IFR on the north side of the eastern Alaska Range. Otherwise, northern Bering Sea VFR. Southern Bering Sea, marginal VFR with the cold air continuing to come down out of the north there, picking up moisture over the open water. And on the upslope areas here, the Alaska Peninsula and Unalaska Island, we've got IFR. And then for the afternoon, same pattern here over the eastern Aleutians, Alaska Peninsula. Marginal VFR a little farther, or the VFR a little farther south in the Bering Sea now, down to about possibly St. Paul Island. And good VFR over the interior. Looks like a weak band coming into the western Arctic coast there, western central Arctic coast, otherwise staying VFR up in that area as well. Solid IFR here over the southeast coast as well as the North Gulf Coast into, again, southern Prince William Sound, and mostly marginal for Kodiak Island. And for the morning Thursday, IFR now up into the western Copper River Basin, maybe the Talkeetna is there, and definitely western Prince William Sound into Whittier, Portage, Passes Canal, those areas down across Resurrection Bay. Western Kenai Peninsula, Cook Inlet, all the way out to the eastern Bering, good VFR continuing. Marginal VFR up into the eastern Alaska Range, trying to push actually north of the mountains there. Another band of IFR here, eastern Gulf of Alaska, IFR for the eastern Panhandle, and marginal for the Aleutian southern Bering Sea. That continues into Thursday afternoon as well. Losing the IFR here along the Alaska Peninsula throughout the day. And again, it looks like VFR to the Pribilofs into the southwest coast. And again, much interior Alaska looking really good, VFR conditions. Southeast interior, though, marginal VFR with some IFR here in the Coast Range. And of course, the Panhandle seeing the lowest conditions for the next couple of days, IFR. And for Enitovik tomorrow, VFR on either approach. Adigan, good VFR as well. Lake Clark and Merrill, another VFR day coming up for those two passes, as well as rainy and windy VFR. Isabel, VFR. And Mentasta, see increasing, gradually lowering clouds, but I think it'll stay VFR into the afternoon. Tanita, however, VFR turning toward marginal VFR, especially on the eastern entrance during the afternoon tomorrow. Portage, marginal VFR, possible IFR there, Passes Canal side, Whittier side there. And for Chilkoot and White, expect IFR. Freezing levels at the surface up to the Kenai Peninsula here through the Barren Islands and along the North Gulf Coast and northern Panhandle with the warm air coming northward there, but 2,000 feet still down toward the Queen Charlotte Islands. Out to the west, freezing levels right across Atka Island there, and 2,000 feet way off to the south. Looking at icing with that lower level moisture here due to the cold air coming over the Bering Sea there. Possible icing here over the from Atka Island into the western Alaska Peninsula below about 6,000 feet, light to isolated moderate. And for the Panhandle, North Gulf Coast, look for isolated moderate rime icing as well, below about 14,000 feet, and that's right into Kodiak Island. And for the jet stream, trough right through here, so southwest flow, 110 knots right into the northern Panhandle, bringing that warmer air and moisture in with it. Back to the west, still cold northerly flow right out of the Arctic, 80 to 110 knots, strongest over the central Aleutians. 9,000 feet, same pattern, north to south flow here out over the Bering Sea, all of the Bering Sea, up to 50 knots over the southern Bering Sea. Light winds over the interior under the low axis here, the trough axis, and then southwesterly 65 knots kind of diverge here along the north coast of the Panhandle and the eastern Arctic coast at about 50 knots. 3,000 feet, 45 knots south winds into the northern Panhandle, the eastern Arctic coast, north winds 40 to 50 knots. Out over the Bering Sea, lighter over the interior areas, and pretty light over the western Aleutians. And Bering Sea turbulence, widespread moderate turbulence here over the western and southwest interior areas, as well as the western Alaska Peninsula, all the way out to Adak Island. And the southern Panhandle looks pretty bumpy tomorrow, as does areas of the North Gulf Coast here. And after the break, I'll be back with a look at the marine forecasts.
I'm a GOES-R series weather satellite orbiting 22,000 miles above Earth. I can see a lot of cool stuff from up here, and I take pictures of it with my spiffy camera that has 16 different settings. I have such good eyesight, I can see clouds, snow, smoke, smog, and ash, so I can warn you about dangerous conditions and help you avoid them. When storms are brewing, I watch them closely and help with hurricane, tornado, and flood warnings to help keep you safe. And my lightning mapper tracks lightning strikes way up in the sky, even through dark, dense clouds. I also help with search and rescue missions. I listen for distress signals from emergency beacons and tell search and rescue teams just where to find people who need help. But even when I'm keeping a close eye on Earth, I'm monitoring weather out here in space, too. I watch the sun for big bursts of energy, which send waves of radiation toward Earth that can affect power grids, block communication with planes, cause errors in GPS, and damage satellites. Space weather is also very dangerous for astronauts working outside the International Space Station. I warn them so they can get inside where they'll be safe. So the next time you watch a weather report or check your phone for the forecast, remember, that's me. So look to the sky and wave. I'll be here. Things are looking pretty bad down there. But don't worry. I'm going to give weather forecasters a heads up and help you stay safe. I'm a GOES-R series weather satellite, and one of my jobs is to keep an eye on Earth's weather as I orbit above. But I'm 22,000 miles above Earth. How does your local weather forecaster know what I see all the way up here? First, I have to figure out what's going on. I point my special camera at the Earth and take pictures of the clouds I see below. My pictures show where the clouds are, but I also take lots of other notes about the clouds. For example, how high they reach into the atmosphere, how much rain they might cause, and when a severe storm may be forming. But I can't keep all of this information to myself. I have to share it with weather forecasters down on Earth. A big antenna is waiting for my call. Since I'm a satellite, I send my pictures and notes in a computer language of ones and zeros. Luckily, the antenna speaks my language. Computers connected to the antenna organize my notes and combine all of the pictures and cloud information and translate them into weather maps. They send a version of the maps back up to me. I'll hold on to these for later. Another copy of the maps is split into smaller pieces. This helps the maps move faster from one place to another. The map pieces are then sent for processing before being sent back up in the sky to a communication satellite. From there, the maps are picked up by antennas at the National Weather Service forecast offices in each region. There are more than 100 offices. I also take the maps that I received and send them out to companies that specialize in making the maps more colorful and better for viewing on TVs and computers. The colorful maps and the maps from the forecast offices then go to your local weather forecaster. The forecaster combines the information from these maps with lots of other information, like model forecast data and radar data, to make predictions about the upcoming weather in your area. And that's how I help you find out if bad weather is going to ruin your afternoon plans. You're welcome. it will be my time to shine in outer space. I'm the GOES-R satellite. That stands for Geostationary Operational Environmental Satellite. And the R stands for my order in this series of weather satellites. Like my older siblings before me, I'll do a lot for watching weather, but I'm pretty special because I have a lot of new gadgets. I'm originally from Colorado, but my journey to space has a few stops along the way. I'll be shipped in a very special satellite shipping container to Kennedy Space Center. Moving me around is not easy. I'm over 18 feet wide and weigh 6,000 pounds. And then things get really exciting. I get loaded onto an Atlas V541 launch vehicle. A big rocket! Woo! After Atlas and I blast off together, my compartment separates from the launch vehicle and I continue to climb higher and higher. Then I break away completely and unfurl my solar panel and antenna. After that, I have to use my thrusters to get into just the right position, 22,000 miles above the ground and traveling 1.9 miles per second to keep up with Earth's rotation. And then I can officially start my job along with my fellow GOES sisters, where I take advanced pictures for more accurate weather forecasts, map lightning in real time, and improve the monitoring of the sun's activity. It's going to be so awesome! I can't wait!
And now, marine weather around Alaska.
Coastal water forecast. Small craft advisories of the south coast tomorrow for south winds at 25 knots and south to southeast winds 20 to 25 knots with some higher gusts on the north coast. Northern inner channels and waters, north winds at 15 knots. Otherwise, Stevens Passage, southeast at 15. Clarence Strait, southeast winds 20 knots. And for Thursday, gale warnings on the central and south coast for south winds at 35 knots, and those seas up around 20 feet. Small craft advisories on the north coast, south to southeast winds 20 to 30 knots there. And small craft advisories in the Lynn Canal, south winds 25 knots. And southeast at 30 for Stevens Passage. Clarence Strait, southeast winds 25 knots with 9-foot seas. And for the North Gulf Coast, eastern North Gulf Coast, east winds at 20 to 25 knots for the day on Wednesday. And western North Gulf Coast, east winds 25 knots. Prince William Sound, northeast at 20 with 4-foot seas. Small craft advisories for Cook Inlet, northeast winds 25 to 30 knots, seas 6 to 9 feet. And for Kamishak Bay, north winds at 30 knots with 10-foot seas. And the Barren Islands looking at a northeast wind at 25 on Wednesday. For Thursday, Cook Inlet, north winds 15 to 20 knots, and northwest at 25 for Kamishak Bay. Barren Islands, winds down to 20 knots from the north. And for the western North Gulf Coast, lighter winds for the day Thursday, east at 15, eastern North Gulf Coast, southeast 15 to 20 knots, and Prince William Sound, winds mostly out of the east at around 15 knots. Kodiak Island, Wednesday, north winds 25 knots. And for the Alaska Peninsula here, north winds 25 to 35 knots, seas ranging from 2 to 4 feet on the Pacific side of the peninsula to 8 to 14 feet on the Bering Sea side. Prince William Sound, north winds at 25 knots with 4-foot seas. And Bristol Bay on Thursday, north winds at 20 knots. Otherwise, the Alaska Peninsula, north winds 20 to 30 knots. And for Kodiak Island, north to northwest winds 15 to 20 knots. For the eastern Aleutians, both in Mackinac and Alaska Island, look for north winds 35 knots for the day on Wednesday, so gale warnings for those areas. Adak and Atka, north winds at 30 knots, and then lighter winds as you head west here toward the area of high pressure. Kiska to Shimya, north to northwest winds at 15 knots. And then for the day Thursday, western Aleutians here, west to Adak, west-northwest winds 20 to 25 knots. And for the central Aleutians here, northwest at 25 knots. And the eastern Aleutians, north winds at 30 knots. For the southwest coast, got gale warnings tomorrow, south of Nunivak Island, north winds 35 knots. Gale warnings also for the Pribilofs, for northerlies at 35, north 30 knots for the St. Matthew Island area. And for St. Lawrence Island and Norton Sound, north winds at 25 knots. Those drop back to 15 knots up there on Thursday, and Yukon Delta Coast down to 15 knots from the north. Kuskokwim Delta Coast stay a little breezy there with north winds at 30 knots, north 25 for the Pribilofs, but west winds at 15 knots for St. Matthew Island. For the eastern Beaufort Sea coast, east to south or west to southwest winds at 15 knots and 20 knot southwest winds for the central and western Arctic coast. And then from Cape Beaufort down to Wales, north winds 15 to 20 knots. And for the following day on Thursday, light south winds. Light south to southeast winds, 10 knots there for the Chukchi Sea, western Arctic coast, south at 15, central Arctic coast, southwest at 15, and the eastern Beaufort Sea coast, not too bad, winds south at 10 to 15 knots. For tonight, low pressure here tracking up just east of Kodiak Island, and that increasing southeast flow, increasing the clouds and eventually some light snow chances over the Kenai Peninsula, southern Cook Inlet, southern western Alaska Range, Kodiak Island. Occasional snow for the North Gulf Coast into western Prince William Sound and into the Panhandle with a winter storm watch out for that area for possible heavy snow. Rain and snow down toward Prince of Wales Island, Dixon Entrance, and snow and blowing snow continues tonight for the central and eastern Aleutian areas. That begins to fade a little bit tomorrow, but stays quite breezy here along the southwest coast into the eastern Aleutians, and rain and snow for the Panhandle, North Gulf Coast, and for Thursday.
These forecasts are for planning purposes only. Call 1-800-WX-BRIEF for a formal pre-flight briefing. Always file a flight plan before you go flying. The U.S. Coast Guard Auxiliary urges you to leave a float plan with a friend or the harbor master before you go boating.